So that's the diplomatic news. But what's happening on the battlefield? Well, Ukraine is all set to receive a new weapon, the F-16 fighter jet. Zelensky has been asking for a long time, but NATO was reluctant. They thought a fighter jet would be a big escalation. Not anymore, I guess. Last week, two NATO nations proposed the idea, Britain and the Netherlands. They proposed to create an international coalition to procure the jets and train the pilots. Just one problem, though. You can't randomly sell F-16s. They're American planes. For a third-party sale, you need the permission of the U.S. government. On Friday, Joe Biden gave it. He agreed to back the International Fighter Jet Coalition. Listen in.
You know, in my private meeting with President Zelensky after the G7 meeting and with his staff, I told him the United States, together with our allies and partners, is going to begin training Ukrainian pilots in fourth-generation fighter aircraft, including F-16s. I have a flat assurance from Zelensky that they will not use it to go on and move into Russian geographic territory.
Some background first. The F-16 is a fighter jet made by Lockheed Martin. It was first flown in 1979. Today it's everywhere. There are more than 2,200 active F-16s in the world, 2,200. That's 15% of the global fleet. The U.S. Air Force calls it low cost but high performance. It's a multi-role jet. You can use it for air-to-air combat and ground attacks. The F-16s were used in the 1991 Gulf War. They've also flown in Afghanistan, Kosovo, and the Persian Gulf, sort of like a workhorse. Ukraine has asked for 200 such jets. The question is, where will they come from? Giving new jets is out of the question, so NATO countries will have to dip into their arsenal. Around 25 countries use the F-16s. These include Poland, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Any of these countries could provide the jets. Zelensky believes the F-16 will change the momentum, perhaps turn the tide in Ukraine's favor. Well, it's certainly possible. Weapons have indeed won wars before. The Stinger missile won the Soviet-Afghan war. It had a 79% success rate. The F-14 Tomcat turned the tide during the Iran-Iraq war. Iran says they shot down 160 jets with their Tomcats. And how many did they lose? Just 16. So weapons can become a game changer. But will the F-16 do the same in Ukraine? Well, there are multiple challenges. The first is training. Ukraine has always used old Soviet planes. Their pilots will have to be trained on the F-16, and that could take many months. Plus the maintenance. The F-16 requires a lot of it. Around 16 hours of maintenance per 1 hour flown. Does Ukraine have that sort of skill or time? If they don't, do they at least have the time to learn it? That's one big question. The second is storing them. F-16 jets require long and well-maintained runways. Reports say Ukraine doesn't really have them. Their runways are more suited to Soviet-era jets. But these are all technical problems. There's an even bigger political problem. How will Russia see this move? Moscow is already threatening NATO. They're calling this F-16 plan a colossal risk for the West. And they're not wrong. We've seen a gradual rise in lethal weaponry for Ukraine. It's not just guns and tanks anymore. We're talking about cutting-edge weapons. First, you had the HIMARS, a rocket that could reach Russian territory. Its range was around 300 kilometers. Then the Storm Shadow missiles, again long range, and now the F-16s. Do you see the trajectory? In February 2022, Ukraine had virtually no capacity to hit deep inside Russia. Now they have multiple options. NATO says Ukraine will not use the long range. You just heard Joe Biden. He says the F-16s will not be used to strike Russian territory. But remember, this is war. Fighter jets are not pets you can leash. Once the fighting breaks out, anything is possible. So why is NATO taking that risk? Is it because Ukraine's defense is faltering? Or is it because they believe Russia is vulnerable? Right now, it's hard to say. There are multiple versions to every story. Just look at what's happening in Bakhmut. It's a town in eastern Ukraine. It's also the longest battle in this war. The Russian assault began sometime in the month of August last year. Russia says the battle is over, that Wagner mercenaries took the city of Bakhmut and they will transfer it to the Russian army. But Zelensky says that's not true.
Today, the Ukrainian forces fulfill a very important task. They are in Bakhmut today. Where exactly? I am not going to tell you. But this means that Bakhmut has not been conquered by the Russian Federation today. There can be no other interpretation.
Is Zelensky saying that to appease his Western allies? Or has Bakhmut really fallen? Most of the city was controlled by Russian fighters, so a Russian victory is certainly possible. But once again, Bakhmut shows how confusing the situation really is. Remember all those Wagner threats and tantrums. Days later, those same people are claiming victory. Was that also propaganda? It's impossible to say, really. But here's one thing we do know. Russia is a nuclear state ruled by a defiant leader. If the tide turns in Ukraine's favor, what do you think Putin will do? Sign a peace deal? Or unleash the Russian war machine? That's the risk with these F-16 jets and long-range missiles.